Yes. Today we are going to see about the simulation of the macro processor. Okay. So normally, what is a macro is? That is, if we are supposed to give as many lengthy code, instead of which we'll be defining the macro so that the line of the code which is there, that will be less when compared with when we are doing the expanded version. Okay. So in the case where we'll be having the macro, it will be given for the convenience of the programmer, and based on that macro we can term it as, first we'll be having the macro definition, then we are having the macro expansion, then the third case which is there is macro invocation. Okay, so in the case where we'll be having the macro definition, as we are saying here, so before going to which I'll be telling you what is a macro and what for it is used. So in the case where in the normal compilation or the normal coding, it will be each and every source code which is there, that will be converted to the object code with the help of the compiler or else the assembler. Okay. And in such cases, that is, in the normal codings, we'll be using in this way. But in the case where we'll be having the macro, before going with, or else before converting that to the object code, before going with the compiler or else the assembler, the macro processor will be expanding the code, and some process which is there, that will be done in the intermediate stage. Okay, so that is the case where the macro processor stands with. So in the case of which we'll be defining, that is, we need to have the macro definition. So for which at first we'll be defining the macro with the help of hash define function. Okay, so afterwards, what we need to do, we need to include some parameters. So for making the parameter substitution, we'll be using the ampersand symbol for making the uh, parameters to be represented over there. Afterwards, we'll be having the expansion. So in the case of expansion, that is when we are having a single line of code, that can be where, for example, when we'll be having, that is the a square, that is the area of a square is a square unit. If that is the case, then just we will be giving area or representing in some way, so that in the case where it will be having the expansion, it will be taking automatically the values when A is entered as an input, it will be making the squares over there. Okay, squares of A over there. So that is how for each and every cases, the macro will be expanded. And in the case where we will be defining the macro, this is a example of a copy code instruction in which we'll be defining the macro like strg macro. Okay, so when we are having strg, each and that is when we are defining it as strg macro, it will be having all such instructions which is inbuilt over there. That is, when we'll be having it, it will be expanded like STA data 1, STB data 2, and STX data 3. So wherever at first we'll be just defining, and wherever we are invocation is just like a call. Okay, so as we are calling the function which is there in recursion and all, as in the same way here too we'll be making the invocation. So that invocation, it will be whenever it is finding strg, it will be invocating that particular macro code, and it will be making the expansion, and it will be carrying out over there. And each and every macro instruction, that will be starting with macro and it will be ending with mn. Okay, so that is how we can find whether it is a macro which is instruction which is started and where it has ended. And in each and every case, that is how it will be invoked. And when we need to substitute the parameter, as how I told, we'll be using the ampersand symbol. Okay, so here, as we have seen in the previous thing, Here we have substituted the parameters like ampersand A1, A2 as well as A3. Okay. So each and every parameters that will be substituted with the help of ampersand symbol here. And in the case of macro processor, we'll be having two kinds, that is one pass as well as two pass assembler. So in the case of one pass, whatever that is the events which I have told now, that is the definition. Then the second one is definition. Then after which we'll be expanding. And the third case we'll be invocating. Okay, all three things will be happen in a single pass. But in the case where we'll be having the other one, that is the two pass. Okay, two pass assembler. At the first pass, it will be just defining. Okay, defining the macro function. And in the second pass, only the expansion as well as the invocation is happening. In the case of here, just an example of a one pass macro processor in which it will be first defining the macro, okay, macro processor, and afterwards it will be expanding here too, and whatever invocation which is there, that also will be carried out here itself. Okay, so that is the way in which we'll be having the macro processor. Okay, so here we are using the macro instructions like macros, read buffer as well as write buffer. So in our program, whenever we'll be providing a read buffer macro instruction, these are all the statements which need to be expanded later for making the process happen. Okay, and the second one is the write buffer. In the write buffer too, when we'll be declaration, that is when we are saying ampersand out as well as buffer address, all such things, it will be the parameterized substitution which is happening over there. And when it is starting with, it will be starting with macro. And when it is ending with, it will be ending with the command like mend. So that we can find this particular macro instruction has ended. Okay. So that is the way in which we will be calling the macro function. We will be expanding it and we will be making it possible. Okay. So this is one. That is in the single pass, as I told, whatever things which are there, that will be taken in a single step. But in the case of two pass algorithm, at first it will be just recognizing the macro definitions, and the second pass only, it will be recognizing what all the macro calls which has happened over there. So these are all the examples which we can give for macros. So here too, for read buffer, loop as well as exit, they have given the instructions which are there. Okay. What are all the expansions which are there that will be termed over here? That is how we'll be creating, that is defining a macro function. Then we'll be expanding. Afterwards, the invocation is happening in the case of macro instruction. Okay. Okay. Thank you, ma'am.